Following its separation from Britain in October 1960, Nigeria formally established itself as a democracy. However, Nigerians' demand for greater representation dates back to the 1920s. Under British colonial authority, a new constitution was drafted in 1922, partly in response to Nigerian calls for reform. The following year, the nation held its first general election for a colonial legislative council. The colonial government thought that the call for complete independence would be restrained through elections, but that was unable to kill Nigerians' desire for self-government. Throughout the 1920s, civil opposition persisted, largely under the direction of feminist and student organizations. Thousands of Nigerian women protested the oppressive authority of Warrant Chief, tribal leaders chosen by the colonial government during the Aba Women's Uprising in November 1929. In 1934, young nationalists from the Lagos region established the Nigerian Youth Movement. Following World War II, it was obvious that Nigeria would gain independence. Another new constitution, adopted in the 1950s, laid the groundwork for Nigeria's federal government and signaled the end of British authority. The Northern People's Congress won the 1959 general election and went on to form a coalition government with the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, which was dominated by the Southeast. This led to the formation of the first ever self-government led by a Nigerian, which helped the country gain independence in 1960. Nnamdi Azikiwe was elected Governor General, and Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa served as Nigeria's first and only Prime Minister. Nigeria was a constitutional monarchy for the first 3 years after becoming independent, with Britain's Queen Elizabeth continuing to serve as the nation's head of state. Nigeria approaching 63 has come in contact with so much hurdles and situations that has questioned the democratic rule of the country. Nigeria has not executed the role of being a democratic country through its process of handling the affairs of the country. It could be seen in past occurrence of the 5 military coups d'etats in Nigeria. Between 1966 and 1999, Nigeria was ruled by a military government without interruption, apart from a short-lived return to democracy under the Second Nigeria Republic of 1979 to 1983 since Nigerian independence in 1960. Over time, the meltdown of the economy, the devaluation of Nigeria's naira, the epileptic availability of basic resources for the citizens, the consistent hike in insecurity, and so many other setbacks has been the consistent progression of the democratic state.
In 1960, you will recall that Nigeria got its independence from the British colonial power. That was October 1st, 1960. And Nigeria experimented with a parliamentary system of government under the prime ministership of Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. That was from 1960 to 1966 until 15th of January 1966, when we had the first military coup in Nigeria that ousted the civilian government. And that coup brought in Major General J.T. Yaguirosi as the first military head of state of Nigeria. So from that 1966 January to 1979 October 1st, we had a series of military rulers that governed the country. And in 1979, Nigeria reverted back to a civilian regime. And this time around, unlike when we practiced the parliamentary system of government, the country adopted the presidential system of government, which was modeled along that of the United States of America. Under the presidential system of government, we have both the ceremonial and executive functions of the state fused together and performed by an individual, unlike what we had under parliamentary, where the head of state is different from the head of government. However, unfortunately, the Second Republic that was ushered in 1979 was short-lived, because in December 31st, 1983, we had another military coup that toppled the government of the then President Shehu Shagari. And that, of course, led to another round of military rule from 1983, December 31st, till 1999. May 29, 1999, save for the short period of 3 months in 1993, between August and November, where we had an interim national government headed by Ernest Shonekan. And of course, he was also removed from office by another military dictator, General Sani Abacha. So we can say from 1960 to 1999, Nigeria has experimented with different systems of government. We've had different experiences with different political leaders, which of course has shaped our political history, has shaped our democracy, as well as our democratic credentials as a country, in the Committee of Nations.
Nigerian independence has been one of a smooth sailing odyssey, in the sense that Nigeria didn't have to go through the kind of struggles countries like South Africa, like most of Southern African countries had to go through before they became independent. As the saying goes, we're given the independence by the colonialists on a platter of gold. There was sufficient mosquito here in this region, the tropics. Incidentally, Nigeria happens to be in the tropical region. By that we mean that we are in between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. And so the mosquito here did not allow the colonialists to settle the way they settled in temperate regions like the temperate part of Africa, the Southern Africa. So the struggle for independence took us through a lot of brainstorming of some emerging intellectuals at that time. People like Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Sir Ahmadu Bello the Sardauna of Sokoto, Chief Obafemi Awolowo of Western Region, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe from the eastern part of Nigeria. But essentially before those ones, there had been the desire for self-rule in the manner of level of education of the colonized people.
1960 to 1999 it's not too long a period of time, but it's the years that they are the years that a lot of things happen in the history of Nigeria. When we gained independence in 1960, the things were not as they had today. There was a lot of hope in the horizon because the country was really doing well at the time. At that time, we didn't have the number of states that we have now. Presently, we have 36 states out of including the Federal Capital Territory. But at that time, we only had 3 regions. Western region, Northern region, and the Eastern region. Then in 1963, then the 4th region was added, which is the Midwestern region. So at that time, a lot of things were going right for Nigeria. Even in Africa, other African countries respected us at that time. And at that time, things were so good for us that even countries that we now look up to, countries like Singapore, for example, countries like Malaysia, they had to come to Nigeria at that time to study how we're productive in our agricultural production. So they came here at that time to study how we're producing our palm oil and how we're doing a lot of other things. And they took that template back to their country to replicate what we're doing. And so we're actually doing a lot of things right at that time. But unfortunately, before 1966, a lot of things started happening. And it has to do with the selfishness of our leaders at the time. Most of them, they wanted to sit in power, and it's not only peculiar to Africa, to Nigeria at that time. It's cut across African countries. In Ghana, the same thing was happening. In Congo, the same thing was happening in a lot of other African countries. So things were so bad politically, but economically we were still doing well. But things were so bad politically that by January 15, 1966, the first military coup took place in Nigeria. So at that time, a lot of lives were lost. We lost our prime minister at the time in the person of Tafawa Balewa. We lost the premier of the northern region in the person of Amadu Bello. We lost the then minister of finance in the person of Okotiebo. We lost the premier of western region in the person of Samuel Ladoke Akintola. So a lot of things happened. Between that 1966 and 1979, the country went through a lot. You know, the country, that military coup actually led to the outbreak of the Civil War, which we all know that started in 1967 to 1970. But immediately after the Civil War ended, Nigeria made a lot of progress. For example, when the Civil War ended in 1970, the then president of Nigeria, the head of state of Nigeria, and the person of General Yakubu Gowon introduced what they called 3 R's. That's reconstruction, that the war just ended. Now he declared what he called no victor, no vanquished. That Nigeria was not a victor then. The eastern region that just lost the war, that they were not, that they were also not victims, that there was no victor, no vanquished. And they introduced a lot of policies. The first one was a policy of reconstruction, then the policy of rehabilitation, then they call it Operation 3 R's at the time. So a lot of things that we are even still enjoying till date was introduced as a result of that policy. One of them is our National Youth Service Corps, for example, and they also introduced the second National Development Plan, which assuming those plans were followed through, probably would not have been in this mess today. So it continued like that until another military coup took place in 1975 that brought in General Muritala Mohammed. But unfortunately, they didn't allow him to spend up to 6 months in the position before he was assassinated. Then his deputy, General Olusegun Obasanjo, became the head of state, and he was there, but he held on to the promise which was already made by General Muritala Mohammed, that power will be transferred to the civilian government by October 1st, 1979. So the military honored their promise, and they transferred power to the civilian successfully in October 1st, 1979. So between 1979 and 1983, we enjoyed civilian government before the regime of General Muhammad Buhari and the then Brigadier General Idi Agbon violently overthrew the government and took over the government. Then between that 1984 and 1999, the country actually went through a series of twists and turns, which is what brought us to the point where we are now.
Nigeria road to democracy till 1999 precisely had been rough, had been a battle of the wits between the civilian populace and the military. But at the same time, Nigeria has not really done too badly. But for the fact that issue of economy, Nigeria has not gotten the economy right. It keeps sliding backward. Every other regime, nothing goes up that does not come down. But in the Nigerian economy, if anything has gone up, it's not coming down. It will continue to spiral.
The challenges that the Nigerian economy, has faced or suffered, they are numerous. And what are the issues that, informed these challenges? And I think that can also be situated within our political system and the roles of our political parties. Now, what do I mean? Majorly, in advanced countries, in advanced democracies, political parties are expected to have ideologies. The ideology drive their policies, both economic, social, and other policies. But what we have observed in Nigeria is that our political parties lack ideology. If a political party has, an ideology and say that, okay, when we come to power, these are the things that we are going to do. This is the economic model that we are going to adopt. Everybody will understand what that is, and of course, we're able to make useful suggestions to improve the economy. But unfortunately, our political parties, they just, I would say that most of these politicians or political leaders just get to power without having a concrete idea of what they want to do with the economy. I think that's a major problem. So what they do is, whatever comes or whatever it is presented to them as the best model, because they lack their own understanding, their own personal knowledge of what they want to do. So political leadership is at the center of the economic issues that we are facing, and the ideology that is lacking among political parties is one of the major features that I would think that is affecting Nigeria's economy. Of course, the way that the economy is tied to the apron string of Western powers. Also, you look at it. For example, Nigeria is an oil-producing country. Our crude is being refined outside. Do you understand? Even the oil industry is controlled by external forces. There's no doubt about that. All these, join together to compound the economic problems that we are facing. It's like the fate of our economy is not in our hands. Nigeria, colonized by Britain, that belonged to the Western, bloc, especially during the period of the Cold War, and our economy, as it were, is modeled, channeled, tailored, towards that area, the Western Europe. So, more or less, I can say that our economy is tied to the European forces, to Western allies, and that, of course, may affect, or actually affects, economic decisions and policies of the Nigerian government. We have so many cases that we can cite, the structural, adjustment program under the Babangida's regime. Despite the hues and cries against it, the government went ahead with it. Do you understand? So what we have here is a neo-colonial economy. Do you understand? Neocolonialism implies that despite the fact that we have got independence as a country, our economy is still indirectly controlled by our former colonial masters. Do you understand? And what these people usually do is to make sure that they put us in a place where they derive maximum benefit. Do you understand? They propose policies to us that they design as the best for the economy, which in reality may be against the interests of the populace. That's the major challenge. Until we see a political leader with the necessary political will that can take some, decisions, though may be painful, but very drastic decision that will help the economy to grow. We continue to lament, and complain.
If you look at Nigeria between 1950 and 1970, you realize that Nigeria of that time is no longer the Nigeria of today. Not that Nigeria has changed in terms of in terms of geography. For example, all the resources that were there in 1960, they are still here with us. With the crude oil was not discovered yesterday. It has been discovered for a very long time, maybe as far back as 1968. So it means those resources are domiciled in our land for a long time. The gold, the bitumen, a lot of other things that we have. So they've been here with us. Agriculture, for example, that has been the means of our sustenance. In fact, it sustained the government during the First Republic. Between 1950 and 1960, in the Western region, for example, the then head of the then action group, being led by Chief Obafemi Awolowo, they did a lot of things. They introduced the first TV station in West Africa. So they built the tallest building in Ibadan with money. They introduced free education. They did a lot of things with agriculture. But beginning from 1970, economy of the world started changing. Things started moving from a subsistence means of economy to what we call a global economy. Unfortunately for Nigeria, because there were a lot of other countries between 1960 and 1970, they've used all their resources to prepare for the rainy day. So when things started changing to a new economy, so those countries had the resources to quickly move to new economy. But in our own case, we're talking about 1960 to 1970 when we had to go through a lot of crises. The First Republic crisis, series of military coup, then the Civil War and all that. And after the Civil War, we started spending our money to rebuild the country again and all that. So we did not have the liberty to do that because we did not have the resources. Then over time, even the resources that we had, what we built, corruption actually hindered us from enjoying the dividends of those dividends that would have been derived from those companies. For example, a lot of white elephant projects were backed on in 1970. In fact, there was a time in 1970s when I mentioned countries like Singapore, that I mentioned Malaysia, a lot of countries, Indonesia, when they were coming to Nigeria, they were studying how good we were doing, and they went back to their country. At that time, they introduced what they called First National Development Plan in Singapore. So if you study that First National Economic Development Plan of Singapore, you realize that it's more or less like a copycat of our own First National Economic Development Plan. So it shows that at that time, those countries actually knew that Nigeria was doing good, that we're actually doing something right. But we had a lot of money. At that time, we had a lot of resources. Our head of state even went as far as declaring, that's in the person of General Yakubu Gowon, even went as far as declaring in 1971 that Nigeria's problem has nothing to do with money, that our problem is on how to spend it. Now, when all those other countries were spending money in building industry, we started spending money on a lot of frivolities that will not sustain us for a long time. That was the time that the National Stadium in Lagos was built. It was the time that the National Theatre in Igomu was built, and they were embarking on a lot of frivolous projects around the country. Ajaokuta, for example, Lua Glass in Ajaokuta. So they were giving out this contract, collecting a lot of money back as bribe from all these contracts, without minding the fact that these individuals, they were not even qualified to build these companies, not talk of managing the company. Then attention also shifted away from our public institutions. For example, before 1975, you discover that all our roads were being managed by the Ministry of Works. At that time, all the parastatals, they were functioning very well. If Ministry of Transportation at that time, they were doing exceedingly well. In fact, the Ministry of Transportation were managing both the land and the air transportation. At that time, we had Nigerian Airways. We had a lot of things going well for us, but unfortunately, our government started appointing individuals that did not know anything about that institution, how to manage or how to move it to the next level. They started appointing them to head those institutions. Now, those individuals got there, they messed them up. A lot of good policies had been introduced in the past. There was time that we had mortgage bank, for example. The bank was actually doing well, but unfortunately, individuals that set the bank backward came on board, and till date nobody knew what happened. We had Bank of Industry, we had Bank of Agriculture. These are the institutions that we have to bring back again if the country is going to go forward. So like I said, it has nothing to do with the state of with the system of government that we practice, but it has to do with the mindset and the caliber of people that we put in power over time, and that we continue to sustain in power.
Speaking about democracy in Nigeria, without mentioning MKO Abiola, says not the entire story of civilian leadership in the country Nigeria. Moshood Kashimal Olawale Abiola was a Nigerian businessman, publisher, and politician in the Yoruba land. He was the supreme military commander of the Oyo Empire and an aristocrat of the Egba clan. Abiola ran for presidency in 1993, for which the election results were annulled by the then military president Ibrahim Babangida because of allegations that they were corrupt and unfair, an election that has been recorded the most free, fair, and credible election Nigeria ever had. It was for this same reason President Muhammadu Buhari changed Nigeria's Democracy Day to June 12 and awarded Abiola the National Honor Grand Commander of the Order of the Federal Republic, an honor awarded to only Nigerian heads of state on 6th June 2018.
The June 12 issue, we cannot talk about Nigeria's Fourth Republic that started in 1999, May 29, without a reference to June 12. The June 12 was a precursor to this Fourth Republic. You recall that the election was annulled by the then military president Ibrahim Babangida, and that led to a series of agitations and a lot of issues that nearly, broke the country into different crises, which led to different crises in the country. However, that June 12 issue was a watershed incident that ushered in, the 1999, the democracy, so to say, that we now enjoy, that came up in 1999. Because without June 12, we may not be talking about May 29, 1999. Because you recall that after Abiola's death, and the then military head of state, Abdulsalami Abubakar, promised that he was going to hand over power, to a democratically elected government. And everybody believed that, okay, since you are handing over power, the right place that the next president should come from should be from Southwest. Why Southwest? Because MKO Abiola, was from Southwest. So there is no way we can disconnect Abiola's, annulled election of June 12, 1993 from the current democratic experience that we are having. You see that during that period we had NADECO, and some of the members of NADECO, after 1999, we find them in different political offices. The current president of the country was a member of NADECO, and so on and so forth. So Abiola's purported victory, I'm using that word carefully and cautiously now because he was not officially declared the winner of that election. Actually, there was no official declaration, but his purported victory, is a precursor to Nigeria's fourth republic. No doubt about that.
It's unfortunate. It was supposed to be one of the most beautiful elections Nigeria has ever had because we had Muslim tickets. MKO Abiola, Baba Gana Kingebe. Are you with me? They won the election. The election was well received by all and sundry. That was where Nigerianness was supposed to start from, so that we forget about whether you are Igbo or Hausa or Yoruba, so that we can move forward. We can think scientifically. But that was annulled. Abiola himself, not that he was perfect, he had his strong points. He studied the University of Glasgow. He made the first class in accounting. So he's not actually a small boy, intellectually speaking. So Nigeria needed something like that, but we didn't get it at that time. So June 12 was a lesson. And then we didn't learn from our traditional thinkers. Achebe in Arrow of God says that it is in the house of the coward that you go and hide to point to the rubbles of when the house of the brave man is burning. After political theories up and down, we must also recognize the God factor in our life. It's a reality. Are you with me? That will happen. The carrier mythology is in African drama as well as any drama in the world, naming that when there's a taboo, where there's a transgression between the natural and the supernatural, there has to be a propitiation of that in form of sacrifice. Some people, they call them carriers. It's in Wole Soyinka's The Strong Breed. It's in Femi Oshofi's No More The Wasted Breed, and everywhere. Namely, that where there's a spiritual problem, something we have to go for it. And unfortunately, Abiola went for that. I'm not saying it's a legitimate argument to political science. You understand? But the truth of the matter is that had happened. It's part of our history. So, and he's been given recognition as former head of state, and I think he should be accorded that fully. The ECFR, where they are putting the names of former head of state in Nigeria, his name should be there. All right? But it's also part of our learning process that happened, unfortunately, that time. And because it won't suit our national psyche for us to refer to Abacha as former head of state and not MKO. It's a major problem. Okay. Having said that, Democracy Day is no longer this also is June 12th. Buhari has done something in that regard. And this continuous transition from smooth transition from one government to the other has been consistent. So we can leave something for the younger one.
The 2023 elections was one election that had the attention of the entire citizens of the country. It was mainly tagged to be the election responsible to make or mar Nigeria. It also saw the most number of candidates availing themselves in the race for leadership. The people were promised a free, fair, transparent and credible election, and also with the implementation of the bimodal voters accreditation system machine, the election saw the highest number of electorates since the birth of elections in Nigeria, especially the youths.
From 1999 to date, I think, of course, our electoral process has been having some certain challenges and problems. But from 2015, we have started recording some progress. I think from 2011 election, yes, 2011 election, which was, coordinated by Professor Atahiru Jega, the former INEC chairman. We have started making some progress through some innovations. Do you understand? 2015, that progress was consolidated on by the introduction of the biometric voter verification. Now in 2019 too, I think there were also some challenges though. But then the introduction of beavers for the 2023 election and high-rev, to me, marked a watershed progress in the electoral process of Nigeria.
When you look at where we started from in 1999, at that time, the information that we have now, they were not at our disposal. At that time, there were a lot of places where elections did not end. 70% of the places in Nigeria that they just sat down, they just wrote down the result. Whatever they announced in Abuja, that's the end. Nobody could challenge them. Then it continued until 2007. In fact, it became worse in 2007. In 2007, INEC, being headed by Professor Maurice Iwu at the time, told us that we shouldn't worry, everything had been put in place, that once election took place, that the Abuja will see it in Abuja and all that. People were saying at that time that we had no resources to do this. Oh no, we put everything in order. But by 2007, it was the worst election. That was the election that brought in Alhaji Umaru Musayara, late Alhaji Umaru Musayara. In fact, when the man eventually was sworn in as the president, he himself, in his inaugural address, he made it clear that he knew that the election that brought him into power was not a flawless election. So things were very worse at that time. At that time, at the state level, a result will be declared in Abuja. Another result will be declared in Abuja. And whatever Abuja declared, that's what they will hold on to. So it continued. Then in 2011, then we had the administration of Goodluck Jonathan, who decided that whatever happened in the state, that though he was a member of PDP, that it's not going to involve in election. At that time, we started seeing a lot of progress.
Although this hope, which many Nigerians, both local and diaspora, held on to, was diminished the moment violence amid other forms of misconduct took place.
Democracy is a concept that defies a universal or general definition. How democracy is understood in this part of the world is quite different from how it is understood in the Western world and how it is being practiced. That's why some people, instead of referring to the type of democracy we have in Africa or Nigeria, they call it civilian rule. That civilian rule is different from democracy. Civilian rule is when you have a non-military man in position of authority. While democracy is different because there are some basic tenets. There are some basic ingredients of democracy that every democratic country, every democratic state must subscribe to. And when we do a critical analysis of the way democracy is being practiced in Nigeria, we may want to say that we are a bit, short of, meeting those required credentials, of democracy. By and large, however, that we have been able to sustain our democracy, quote and unquote, from 1999 to date without any form of military intervention is a plus. It shows that we are moving, we are making a progress. Nigeria is a transitional democracy. In other words, we are transiting from a dictatorial rule that ended in 1999 to consolidated democracy. We are not yet there. We are in between. Do you understand? In that spectrum, Nigeria is in between. We are in the middle. We are still moving. And when you are moving on that democratic spectrum, it is not unexpected that we may be lacking in some areas as far as democracy or the democratic practice is concerned. So Nigeria is not yet a full-blown, democratic state because of some challenges that we are facing. You can name them in terms of our electoral process, in terms of how government obeys, court judgment, etc., etc. Those features shows that we are still growing. We are not yet there. Nigeria, you can describe us as a baby democracy.
Election has been fraught with malpractices. There's no doubt about that. Nigerian election has been fraught with malpractices, and it's like the recent the election, the more fraudulent. Because at a point in time, like, we weren't this sophisticated to be able to, in terms of election, people will be on the queue. Our level of development were not too civilized to want to rig elections, to go and carry ballot boxes. You understand? So the idea of election recently in Nigeria has been fraught with malpractices worse than what it used to be in the wee hours of colonialism. But but our models too are not perfect. American election, the election that brought Trump in as against Hillary Clinton, we knew how sophisticated the satellite was manipulated. So those are the problems of civilization. Are you with me? So at the end of the day, neither here nor there. Nigeria will get to the aggregate of the fact that we cannot get a perfect election, really.
Till now, I think what made people believe that there was a retrogression is because of what happened in the last election. But the truth is that what happened in the last election, in 70% of what happened in the last election, you cannot call that a retrogression. Like we can talk about, we can say, okay, it has to do with maybe the mindset of our people, because it started before 2019. In 2017, we have been shouting before 2017 when APC government introduced what they call commercialization of election. At that time, before in 2017, a lot of people would not even have the boldness to go out to vote, because a lot of people were being killed at the polling unit. But now you don't see things like that again. You only see it in a few places. But at those times, it wasn't like that, even up till about 2015. But now you don't see it again. And what they do now is that they go out there, they buy, so they buy people's conscience, and people sell their conscience willingly. So a situation where you see that, so you cannot really say that it's a retrogression. It only shows that our people, because people are there is an holy book that says that God looks at the heart of man and said it is desperately wicked. We have people that one way or the other, they keep thinking of how to remain in power for a long time, and they know that the way they used to do before, their old way of life, of bringing out guns, killing people, sending them away, that those ways are no longer working. So they are now coming up with a kind of more acceptable way of imposing themselves on the minds of the people. Now they sell their vote. Now they buy the vote, and if there is no seller, there will be no buyer. Now they want to buy them, so they bring in money, and people collect money, and a lot of people vote for them. So with that, if once you vote and you vote, I vote, for example, I voted in Ondo, and I knew what happened in my polling unit. I didn't vote in Ondo. I voted in Akure, the state capital, and I knew what happened. And people were voting willingly, but they were actually collecting money. But because there was no cash around at the time, they were giving them card. So which means that is the conspiracy between the politicians and even the banks, because once you put in the code, then they will credit your account. So a lot of people were doing, but people were doing that willingly. But we can only hope that a time will come that policy, that way of buying election will also fade away. Now we're in a global age. We're in a system whereby even if you vote in any remote part of your state, you should be able to see the results immediately. But now we are not doing that. We are not seeing that because we live in a country where we only have 14% internet coverage. It means that 14% internet coverage, it means that 86% of Nigeria, many of them don't even have internet accessibility. So, and election takes place in every area. in every area of Nigeria. So it means that for us to be able to have a successful election that will be devoid of corruption, that will be devoid of this kind of issues that we are witnessing now, so it shows that we have to work on our economy. Everything still revolves around the economy. We have to work on the economy, then we have to work on technology. So by the time we get to that level where we can at least have 80% of our area covered with internet, then definitely we are going to go far. So but we are actually making progress, because these beavers, if you study how it works, if you see how it works at that time, it's actually a very good thing. But it's just that we will not be able to maximize its potential if we cannot have all these internet facilities and everything it takes to actually broadcast the election live. But obviously, if we could attain this height between 1999 and 2023, the journey is very slow, extremely slow and painfully slow. And I've already cited the reasons why it was slow, because of the selfishness of our leaders and the people that have been in power over time that are supposed to have nothing to do with government at all. But if our people keep doing the right thing, if we keep voting people now that we know that they will get into power and they will do things that are right, and that will not vote with sentiment, definitely we are going to get it right.
The 2023 elections happens not to be the only situation where many lives have been lost. The country has experienced such in so many occasions, especially during the recent 2020 EndSARS protests. The issue of secession has been raised by various ethnic groups in the country, as many have stated that dividing the country is the only way forward to living peacefully, hence the birth of secession.
The insecurity that we are witnessing, for the past, I think, 5 or 6 years now, has so many underlying factors behind it. You recall that there is hardly any part of the country that we don't have these issues of insecurity, from the northwest, north central, southeast, southwest, and some of the factors, that is accounting for this spate in violence, in insecurity, could be, linked to agitations by some group of people to secede, from the country, from Nigeria. We have different secessionist groups like the IPOB, IPOB. Even in Southwest now, we have the Yoruba Nation, agitators. Though these groups claim to be, using peaceful means to achieve the objective, but you and I know that the agitations have caused, some violence, in some parts of the country. You will recall that in 2011, South Sudan, after so much agitation, South Sudan became an independent country from Sudan. Now, if you look at South Sudan today, can you say that it is better off compared to how it was before they become an independent state? That is the question. Because my position is this: if a particular group decides to form or to secede from the federation, within that particular group, you also find another minority that will feel unsatisfied with maybe the policies and programs of the new government and may want to also secede. That will also compound the problem and lead to another, issue. So if you ask me, I think we are better off, together as one united, indivisible country. The more we are, the more the merrier, they say. The better, the stronger we are. Do you understand? What we should do is to understand our differences and find how to accommodate one another. Seceding from Nigeria is not the best option, if you ask me.
Democracy is defined to be a system of government by the whole population or all the eligible members of a state, typically through elected representatives. However, it is stated to be a system of the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Although the purpose of democracy in Nigeria cannot be said to have been executed, as the people no longer have the liberty to uphold their rights as should, as expected in the real democratic sense of governance.
You know, we start the debate regarding rights from the naturalists and the positivists. The naturalists, people like St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine of Hippo, were philosophers who believed that men are created equal. Up to the time you get to American philosophers like Thomas Jefferson, who talks about Declaration of Independence, which says that all men are created equal and they have inalienable rights to freedom, to liberty, to life out of the world. Leaves much to be desired, in the sense that you cannot exercise your rights. You don't have a right to sleep. You don't have a right to do whatever you need to do. The roads are bad. All right? The roads are bad. When you are driving, the traffic wardens, they want to arrest you, stop your car for not having driver's license. They want to know where your roadworthiness is. If you don't have, you haven't paid, they want to seize your vehicle, they want to sanction your vehicle. But nobody is going to sanction the government for not fixing the road. So to that extent, a chapter like Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution, to me, is anti-human rights. Because it is non-justiciable. What are the principles, what are the fundamental principles and the fundamental objectives of human rights? They are not to be found in Chapter 2. You cannot enforce it. Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution is non-justiciable, meaning that where government it has erred or has not done what it ought to do, no citizen can take government to court. But when somebody does anything that is criminal, for instance, government can prosecute that and send the person to jail. You understand? So to that extent, our human rights practice and procedure is yet to meet the standard anywhere in the world. And until we are ready, there isn't anything that an American should be able to enjoy that you shouldn't have a right to enjoy it. Because it's the same planet. It's the same God that created us. Are you with me? There's no reason why an American should wake up in the morning and say, oh, what do I feel like eating? You come to me, Mr. Martinez, I said, Angela, okay, can we stop by at Crunchies there and get some things to eat? And we what do you call it? Chicken pie, steaming hot, because there was light overnight. Cold drink to go with it. But where there's no cold drink to drink, there's no light, you come to class, you are dehydrated. You know, when you want to flush your toilet, water cannot come because there's no light. So issue of rights, human rights, is also contingent on what the government is doing in terms of provision of infrastructure. People should have a right to water, to good roads, to good industries, good jobs. You understand? The educational system must be fashioned towards making sure that our graduates are employable. We apply our knowledge to developing our society. Where that is not happening, that we can't talk about human rights, really.
We are all citizens of this country, and we can see, from the activities of government agencies, the security forces, for example, the military, the police. We read and hear about some of the atrocities that are being carried out by these agencies, which of course violate human rights. However, we also know that in recent times, the authorities are trying their best, to curtail the violation of human rights, infringement of human rights by these agencies. So it is either here or there. Do you understand? So the point is that we have some forces that are infringing on people's rights, but we also have the instrumentality of the law. We have the law courts that people can go to seek redress whenever their rights have been violated.
The issue of human rights is actually a very tough. It's a very tough issue to address. It's difficult to address in the sense that if you bring in 10 different people and you ask them questions, their answers are going to be different. It depends. So they will tell you, even if, for example, people who are living in the streets, who are not even free to move from their house probably to the next street due to the fear of policemen arresting them. So they will tell you that there is no fundamental right, because by the time you get to the police station, whether you like it or not, you still have to tip them before they can allow you to go. And people who are driving, maybe you have a car, for example, and you have an encounter with traffic officers on a daily basis, and all your despite the fact that all your documents are complete, they continue to victimize you. They continue to do a lot of things that will make you to give them some tips before they allow you to go. So you feel there is no fundamental human right. But like I said earlier, if you look at where we're coming from, Nigeria has been traveling a very long road. We have been coming from a very long way. If you look at the distance we are coming from, and you look at where we are today, and you look at the amount of information that have gone out, especially in the last 10 years, realize that we're actually making progress. Yes, we are not where we want to be. We have not gotten to that bus stop, but no nation can actually get to where. Even in the United States of America till date, a lot of black individuals are still afraid to even go out, even as we speak. So the same thing with a lot of other countries. So it's everywhere. But as far as Nigeria is concerned, Nigeria is actually making progress, because now we've seen a situation. Now people can go on Twitter, for example, and release an information, and before you know it, the law enforcement officers will take it up, and before you know, justice will be done. If you look at that, you know that the country has made, but we are not where we are in terms of progress that we can see, in terms of probably victimizing one person physically and probably people responding. We are making progress. And in terms of freedom of speech, we're also making progress. We can do all this, we can criticize government, we can mention names based on facts today, because now our fundamental human rights is guaranteed. Under the military system of government, there was nothing like that, because constitution is set aside. Your fundamental human right is subjected to the desire of the military administration. But under this administration, we see it as our government. It may not be the kind of government that we want, the kind of government that we desire, but we are actually enjoying some dividends as far as fundamental human rights is concerned. But that's physically. But there are a lot of remote issues where people of Nigeria flout people's fundamental human rights, citizens' fundamental human rights, and even the federal government trampled, or federal or state government trampled on people's fundamental human rights, and people are not even noticing it. For example, let me just give an instance. Nigeria is a member of the United Nations organization, and whatever rule or whatever policy introduced by the United Nations, once that policy is adopted by a country, then it has automatically become a part of the country's rule. And Nigeria, being a member of United Nations, we have also adopted a principle that says that the principle that says that any form of victimization against people who are internally displaced, either internally displaced by flood, or that's by natural occurrence which we have no control over, or by man-made crisis like the Boko Haram or a lot of other things that have happened and still happening in Nigeria. So those individuals, that anything that you do to probably to affect their progress or their happiness, then you have trampled on their fundamental human rights. So Nigeria adopted it, but unfortunately till date you realize that there are people that have been displaced, and once they get to your land, and that rule says that if, for example, if we had a land and somebody was displaced and the person came to the house, we had no right to send the person out of the house, because once you send the person out, you've committed crime against humanity, which is the most grievous crimes that you can ever commit, one can ever commit. So that one has committed is a crime against humanity, which is a very serious crime. But in Nigeria today, we see that on a daily basis. People are being displaced. They come to a place, even the government themselves will even go there and forcefully evict them. So we do a lot of people's attention are not in those areas. So these are the remote issues. But in terms of physical, or in terms of what we can see, we've made progress. And with time, we hope that by the time we make more than enough progress in this area, then people's attention will turn to the other side, and with no time at all, we'll be able to get to our destination.
Just before the inauguration that took place on the 29th of May 2023, there were predictions that the set date was going to be moved due to the pending 2023 presidential election verdict. that was still ongoing hearing. Miraculously, the inauguration took place without the presence of predicted violence. However, the new administration is faced with so much pressure from different field sectors. As such, much expectations on the side of the citizens.
We continue to remain a developing country. It's a good thing to be developing. It shows that Rome is not built in a day. But the people keep saying that Rome is not built. Even till today, they are still building Rome. So the same thing with Dubai. People will tell you that, Dubai, when they want to, they say Dubai was built for 6 months. So you ask them, okay, all the what they've been building for the past 100 years. So what are they building? They've been building. The building is so when you build, it's a continuous exercise. Even if you have a house today. Yes, it will look good. A lot of people will be happy for you, but you realize that in 2 years, that things also it will start becoming obsolete. In 10-20 years, you have to improve on it. So even United States of America, we call them develop, but they know that now they still have to continue to develop. So to call something a developing is actually a very good thing. It shows that we have moved from one stage to a stage. We have underdeveloped state. We have undeveloped state, we have underdeveloped. So now we have developing. But what's supposed to be our focus is the fact that now in the committee of that developing, how are we faring? Recently, for example, there was a meeting that took place. There was an international conference that took place in South Africa among these countries they call BRICS countries. Those BRICS countries, they were the countries they were also developing countries, but they were developing countries that have gotten to a stage, because developing also has levels, it has stages. So we need to now look at the stages where we are and now study it and know whether we're actually making progress, whether we made progress from that stage in the last 5 years to where we are now. Now we have among those countries that met, South Africa was the host country. Then we have among that developing, we had Russia, then we had India. So we had all these countries. Singapore, they were part of those developing countries. So all of them came together there, they met. Now if you look at this country, if you look at what the level of their development, you know that it's way different from our own level of development. So that's what we need to tell our leaders. That now if we have been developing countries for years. Now we need to move up within that developing countries. Now we are not talking of develop, because if you are going to talk of before you attain the height of development, you must have been able to do something. Now there are a lot of things that we cannot do in our country. Even if we want to build, we cannot build cars, we cannot do a lot, but there are things that we can actually do, that we can start gradually, that can help us to reduce the rate at which we rely on exportation. Now the government, in a way, they started well. Let's hope that one can only hope that they actually build on it. For example, now they were talking about the unifying the exchange rate. Because now one of the things that is actually sending people away, if you say developing countries should be able to encourage people outside to bring their investment into Nigeria. But the current system of Nigeria, the nature at which we practice our economy, the current policy of our central bank is scares a lot of investors. It's easy, for example, to bring in money to Nigeria than taking the money out of Nigeria. So as a result of that, a lot of people, even Nigerians who are actually doing well, so many of them are skeptical of bringing in their money. If you bring in $1 million, even if you want to send out 1,000 naira, the central bank will start telling you to fill a lot of form A, form K, form C, form T, and all that. So, and before the money will even go, before the transaction will sail through, it might take 3 months, it might take 4 months. And know that because there are a lot of issues that has to do with parallel markets. Parallel markets, you have to be, once you do any transaction, your mind will be up, because until that transaction sails through, you don't know whether you are going to fall into one scam or the other. But if it is official, you know there is no problem. So with that mindset, you rather go to the official settings, and you know that transaction will sail through in less than 24 hours. So we need to do that, so that investments can come in, so that investors will come in, so that other businesses, even among Nigerians, so that they will come in. And we need to now work on our economy politically. That's finally, because whatever we do, we need to know that politics affects economy. If we continue to play politics of bitterness, it will blind our eyes to see the people that actually have what it takes to even move the country forward. If you are playing politics of bitterness, you would rather go and bring one Alima that has nothing to do with economy to come and manage economy than to bring in maybe one Obi from the east that you know that this person is actually an economic guru. He has what it takes, because I will not allow him. So we need to get to that point where we will do it with the politics of bitterness. Then we now need to ensure that all the parastatals, that's the only way that corruption can be reduced. We have to make sure that all the agencies that have to do that are set up to watch over the excesses of individuals that they have to they enjoy autonomy. For example, there are a lot of institutions that we set up that over time, all those institutions have been bastardized. AFCC, for example, even INEC. We have to remember. So the president must be so altruistic that it will allow those individuals to enjoy their autonomy.
It's a Hegel. Hegel is a German philosopher. Let me quote him. He says that in every state of things there is a contradiction, which the conflict of the opposite must resolve. We can't get it right at the same time at a time. We'll be there, fumbling and wobbling until we get there someday. But we must. What is important is that where a people are educated enough to know that it is not an ideal condition they are in, and that they need to move forward, then there is hope. You understand? We must be honest with ourselves. That we want to go forward. That we want to advance. There must be national consciousness that this country is not where we are supposed to be. We must move forward. Then we will eliminate charlatanism, quackery. You understand? According to Matthew Arnold, a disinterested effort to bring the best out of ourselves. You understand? Some of us will go outside, some of us to outside the world through tourism to see what is happening there. And seeing that what is happening in Quebec or California, it has to happen here. When we all decide that it's high time for us to develop, you understand what I'm saying? Not stealing, not robbery, not theft, conversion, not malpractice. We need to do something about that. Education. People must be educated. People must just be educated because you need to know what is happening elsewhere. All right? To know how nations are developing, how nations are growing. Nations are more scientific than ever before. Very likely a Tinubu administration will go a long way to whittle down some of those things, because eventually when we have good governance in Nigeria, nobody wants to think about that. There is light, there is security of lives and property, there is life abundance. You understand what I'm saying? We can come back to 1 naira to $1 or 1 naira to £1. Price of petrol can go to like 25 kobo per liter. You understand what I'm saying? By that time, if you now come out and say, it has to be Biafra or nothing, we just be sounding nonsense, because guys will feel that there are other things to do.
The way forward is just for everybody to do the right thing. Political leaders to do the right thing. Everybody knows what is right, but unfortunately, we know because of some pecuniary interest, people tend to do what is against the law. The rules are there for, like I always tell people, when you talk about constitutional review, constitutional amendment, it's not about the constitution in most cases. It's not about the provisions of the constitution, but it's about the people that are operating the constitution. The slogan that the APC brought in 2015, I guess, was change. Change begins with you. So if we all imbibe in that culture of doing the right thing, in everywhere we find ourselves, when government does the right thing, we know what is right for the society. And when we have a government that has the political will, to effect changes, to make, policies that will galvanize the economy, we always see these changes around us. But when people tend to be selfish and only pursue their own political and personal interests, there is no way we are going to develop, as a country.
Nigeria is a nation that covers an area of 923,769 square kilometers, and with a population of over 230 million. It is the most populous country in Africa and the world's 6th most populous country. Nigeria is a multinational state inhabited by more than 250 ethnic groups speaking 500 distinct languages, all identifying with a wide variety of cultures. Nigeria is a typical example of beauty in diversity. Therefore, with how great and richly Nigeria has been blessed with so many talents, resources, and even culture, Nigerians are enjoined to come together in oneness with the new administration to create and achieve a better Nigeria. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Happy democracy.